Commissioners, I apologize for the time, but if you can bear with us just a little bit more, we have a wastewater rate increase coming up, and we really feel it's necessary to give you a briefing on that. We're going to start with a brief reminder of what the PACE 10 program is by Wayne Loveday, and then Mark will share with you the components of the rate increase.
Commissioners, I want to take a few minutes. There's a lot of important information to share with you about rate increase and information about that. But just real quickly to tell you a little bit about what's been going on and just a quick review of the history of the wastewater system and the PACE 10 program. As you know, we're not alone in this thing. A lot of people are facing the same things we have faced in the past, and they're still facing those issues today. Every major city in Tennessee right now is either under an order or discussing those kinds of orders with either state and or EPA. Ever since 1987, when KUB acquired the system from the city, we've been making continued improvements to the collection system and doing lots of things that we felt were necessary to bring the system up to the level of reliability and condition it needed to be. And it wasn't until 1999 that we began to see on the horizon the concerns about environmental issues and the pace at which we were doing things. And that led to the state order in 2003 that was quickly followed by discussions with EPA and several parties, and ultimately the consent decree in 2005. And as a result of all that since 2005, and you've heard this before in our presentations, 5-year plan, but we've increased investing. We've made a lot of system improvements. We've replaced a lot of infrastructure, pipes, pump stations have been upgraded. We're now focusing a lot on the plants as we continue to work on the collection system. And so a lot of things have been done, which has resulted in a significant reduction in sewer overflows, which were the benchmark by which everybody was judged back in 2003 when we first started these discussions. And as you see, those have gone down steadily over that time. And another important part that we have addressed or will address with the plant improvements is the idea of diversion, of having our plants that were designed and approved to blend. We're going to address that in the next few years with the amendment to the consent decree. But again, because of process changes and more scrutiny of those processes during high flow events, you can see that the number of events themselves have been reduced significantly, even without the system improvements or plant improvements we're getting ready to make. So what's left to do? Well, there's still a lot of work. And Mark will go into this in a lot more detail. Even beyond the consent decree, even beyond the amendment to the consent decree, KUB will continue to invest on an average of 1.5% to 2% of continuing to improve and replace the system as needed. So with that, I'll answer any quick questions you may have.
Well done.
Thank you. Mark?
I'm not that fast. You take 3 minutes.
No, it's not. It's close. Very close.
Commissioners, I was told I have 20 seconds. I'll try. Real quickly, one of the primary goals of our funding plan for wastewater, we knew we were going to have rate increases. That was just a fact. There was no question around that, but to do them in a manner that they were equitable and phased in over time. And we have done that to date. We'll continue to do that. One of the keys in being able to do that was having available debt capacity and using that debt capacity to spread the cost over both current and future ratepayers. And we've used a lot of debt so far. We'll continue to use a lot of debt in order to achieve that. But those are keys, those two funding mechanisms working together to maintaining a financially healthy wastewater plant while we're going through the consent decree. We are going to spend a lot of money. We will continue. Over the entire term of the CD, we will spend a total of $930 million in capital, slightly under $1 billion. And about $650 million, or 70% of that, is for the mandated requirements of the CD. The other $280 million is for other wastewater projects that had to be done, plant projects over the years that had to be done, the wastewater division share of general capital projects. But then also a big part of that is $100 million for systematic replacement. That's what Wayne referred to briefly. That'll begin after the initial term of the order concludes, and that will start in 2017. And that's just a regular 1.5–2% replacement of pipe going forward, beginning in 2017. So a lot of money being spent. A graphical representation of that, and again to sort of illustrate what Wayne said, prior to the CD, I included 3 years leading up to that, we were spending about $1 million a month, about $13 million in total wastewater capital. You can see with the CD how it has escalated, and on average about 52, actually 54 million. $1 million a week is 52. We're actually going to spend on average 54, 55 over that period of time. There's some years we're spending quite a bit more than that. You can see back here the initial storage tanks being installed, and another storage tank there. The latter few years of the order in 2021, that has to do with phase 2 of the composite correction plan, doing some of the plant modifications related to blending and such. So again, a lot of dollars over many years. The funding plan, the key is to combine the debt issues and the rate increases, again, to spread the cost out over time. To date, we've sold $300 million in bonds to help fund the CD capital requirements. By the end of the order, we'll issue another $390 million. So again, close to $700 million in revenue bonds will be issued over that 16-17 year period. We've also had the rate increases. As you know, we had a 50% rate increase in April of 5, 50% January of 7, 8% September of 8. That is consistent. The level and timing of those rate increases were consistent with the original funding plan we presented to the board in 2004, as is the $290 million in bonds. We will have additional rate increases beginning in early 2011, and the plan calls for that to, a modest size rate increase to occur every other year beginning in 2011. That's the current funding plan. Real quickly, in order to issue all that debt, if you go back in time pre-consent decree, our target debt to capitalization was around 30%. We had a 2.25 max debt coverage target. We worked with the rating agencies in order to be able to issue a greater amount of debt, and we relaxed some of those guidelines, so to speak. I guess relaxed maybe isn't a good term. We modified those guidelines to give ourselves some more financial flexibility, but still supporting and having a very healthy wastewater financial plan. And I've already said this, so I'll just talk briefly here. Again, a lot of debt to fund a lot of capital over that period of time. A wastewater rate increase is required this fiscal year. We discussed this with the board, if you'll recall, back in the spring, that this is the next year for a wastewater rate increase. If approved, it will provide an additional $7.2 million or 12% in revenue for the wastewater division to help fund the capital requirements of the CD. For the typical residential customer, it'll increase their bill $4.44, taking it from a current level of right under $38 to a little over $42. And right now, we're debating exactly when the effective date of the rate increase will be. It will be sometime in early 2011. We're looking at that February to April time period, and when we come back with a recommendation on first reading, we will have decided what that effective date and communicated that to you before that meeting in November. But again, it will be in that February to April period. And just like we did with the water rate action that we had in 2009, we're going to have some modest rate structure modifications as well to help parallel or to match with how our water rate structures look right now. Commissioners, just real quickly, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about cost management. And you'll recall back in the spring of 2009, we did introduce our recession response plan. It had over $100 million in cost reductions and deferrals. And as a result of that, it's impacted several of the recent rate increases that we've considered or actually implemented. The water rate increase that went into effect this past January, it was originally planned for 30%. It was reduced to 10%. An electric rate increase that we had in July, that was able to be deferred for a fourth consecutive year and actually reduced 1%. And then a gas rate increase that we'd planned for 2009 has been deferred indefinitely. And this wastewater rate increase that we're talking about today has actually been pushed back several months, and it's a little bit lower than it otherwise would have been without some of the cost management efforts that we've had. And a couple of the key financial indicators for wastewater, just to show that the rate increase is necessary to maintain the financial balance of the division. On the left, you see the debt ratio. If I take the rate increase out of the plan, we go up to an excess around 72-73% debt ratio towards the end of the 5-year plan. And again, right now our target is approximately not to go too much over the 65% level. More importantly, the ability to service that debt and pay it off. This is the key indicator that the rating agencies look at. We have an internal target requirement of 1.5, bond covenant 1.2. If you take that rate increase out of the plan, you can see that the blue indicates what it would be without the rate increase. We actually go below the bond covenant requirement and stay perilously close to it over the course of the 5 years. That is just something we do not want to happen. It impacts your credit rating with the S&P and Moody's, and it adversely impacts it, and also adversely impacts our ability to issue future debt. So the rate increase is needed not only to help fund the capital program, but also to maintain the financial balance long term. Part of our analysis for the rate action was to look at our rate structures and compare across the nation, compare locally with the utility districts. Basically, we saw the same thing we saw when we looked at the water rate structures last year, that things are changing, and utilities are moving to separate rate schedules for residential and commercial customers. They're also beginning to recover more of their costs in minimum bills and fixed monthly charges. And when we look at what the utility districts were doing and just compared the components of the bill, the minimum bill and the usage, you can see that currently KUB has slightly the highest monthly bill compared to Allsdale Powell. It's very close in our heels, but we have the lowest minimum bill of the 5 utilities. And over time, some of these utilities have been increasing that minimum bill, and over time we will need to do so. It will need to ultimately be a higher proportion of our customers' monthly bill than it is right now. And it has to do with primarily that responding to decline in sales, and that you're going to be recovering more of your costs through fixed monthly charges. And that's something we began to implement with the water rate structure last year. We want to follow suit with the wastewater rate structure as well. So the proposed structure changes that you'll see next month when we talk in more detail, we're going to have separate rate schedules for residential and commercial. We'll just have 2 rate blocks for residential, as opposed to the 6 we have right now that are actually declining in nature. And then we're going to transition to have a monthly customer charge for residential and commercial customers. Right now there's a minimum use charge and an oversized meter charge. We're combining the 2 into a monthly customer charge. Again, just like we did in water, it'll parallel those changes we made last fall. And this chart just shows the impact on the customers. And real quickly, again, for the typical customer, 444 or less with the wastewater rate increase, and 62% or roughly 2/3 of our customers will see that increase or less on their monthly bills. And I'll just close with this slide. And obviously the consent decree has had a significant impact on our rates over time. And what I did was just determine what our bill would be if we did not have the CD at all, and calculated it to be around $22.71. And we still would have had rate increases over time. I assumed around 10%. That was our plan before the CD. Every other year, a 10% rate increase. At that, we would be at $22.70, and we would actually have the lowest bill of all the utility districts if you excluded the requirements of the consent decree. So next month we will give a more detailed presentation, and maybe a little bit more lengthy presentation when you consider the wastewater rate increase on first reading. And we will have obviously a recommendation on an effective date.
Questions for Mr. Walker? Thank you very much, sir. Collectively look forward to seeing you next month. Presentation. Anybody have any other business or input, or anybody out there? I guess Mr. Hackworth, who had signed up to speak, is no longer with us, so exited the room. Okay, we're going to adjourn the meeting, and I'll remind you that we'll have a lunch across the hall that's open to the public.
Dinner.